Hi, Kathy here from Kathy's Cute Creations with the last week, week 5 of the Fort Worth Fabric Studios Dark Flight. And you should have downloaded your paperwork, which is the assembly. And then the next sheet will show that it's all assembled with the sides. This is going to be the sides here. This is your final sheet that shows what it's supposed to look like. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to put the rows together first, which is what this is. Row 1, row 2, and row 3. So let's begin. Here's what the first one's going to look like, and you want to be very mindful of this right here. You're going to be doing a nestling. All right, just pay attention and take your time and go ahead and mark your tips. Now, whatever you do, don't panic if you end up losing your tips. Alrighty? Nobody is going to literally be paying attention to what's going on with that quilt. All they're going to be doing is looking at that pretty little design. And that's it in a nutshell. If you can't mark it, then just go along real slow and pay attention. And don't worry about marking it if that's the case. Now, if you ironed it correctly, then it's going to be fine. If you didn't, don't worry about it. You can iron it now as you go along. And just match up everything, because everything nestles, all these little corners. I think the one doesn't, but the rest do. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this one. We're going to do the other side. And then when I've got the whole thing done, each row I'll lay it out so that I can show it to you. I do not want to make this an hour video, so I'm just going to show part of my sewing. You all know how to sew by now, I hope at least. All right, let me pin the other one. Now we're going to do the other side. And yes, I have pinned mine. Oh, let's help it out a little bit here. There we go. So appropriate to be sewing this while it's nice and cool outside. Got a little dip in our weather. Haven't turned the heat on yet. I know some have. Talked to some of my co-workers. Their homes got down to in the 50s, so they turned their heat on. Mine and home hasn't dropped on the inside below 73, so I haven't turned my heat on. Matter of fact, while some of them were having their heat on, I still had my windows open. I like it just a little cool in here. Alrighty, there's our first row. Let's go ahead and finish the next 2 rows. Okay, so it's finished and it's laid out here on the table. It's the best that I can get it. So see, the 2 bats on the top are going outward and the one in the middle is going inward. Then our pumpkin. Then we have the bats going in towards the pumpkin. So they all 4 go towards the pumpkin. That's got a little bit of a dip right there. That's why that looks like that. And then this one's on my table here. So now that we have the main piece, we're going to sew the log cabins in strips. Now you're going to take your orange strips. I went ahead and I changed my thread to orange. You don't have to if you don't want to. You can use the same thing you've been using all along. And we're going to sew it down the sides, not the tops. You're going to do the sides first. Then when you're done doing both your sides, that's when you're going to move to the top. Do the top in the orange. When you're done with the orange, you're going to do the black. Because this is what makes the whole inside of the quilt before we put the blocks are going to be, the log cabin blocks are going to be like the trim instead of just your plain fabric. Which I think is a pretty neat idea. I guess I could tell you a little bit about the book. I did get you prepped on that book. I can just mention some of it. Then if you're interested, you can go ahead and check it out. And the book I'm talking about is the one that I was talking about in the last video. So the main people that were in the story are the man that went to war with the woman's husband, the woman herself, her child, the cat, the hermit that's in the forest, and then there is the pilot that flew the plane. He is a main one too, just based on a little bit that they told, because you know how they prepare you for whoever they're talking about. I had a good feeling about the pilot. I never thought that he was gonna, well, I guess you could say, gonna turn on him. He never turned on him. He was a good guy, even though they kind of thought of him as having to do with the bad guy, I guess you could call him. But he turned out to be a good guy. He was more or less forced to do what he had to do to keep his wife and child safe. And that's usually how they get you. You've got somebody in your family that you care about. So, all right, so we're done with this side. Let's go ahead and get the other side, and I'll tell you just a little bit more about that story. Now, in case you're wondering, I didn't cut this off at the bottom whenever I sewed the other side. I'm going to wait until they're both done, and then I will cut it. I will show you a little bit of how I cut it, just in case you haven't done that yet on a quilt and you want to see it. But anyway, about this story, and I'm just going to be like real vague about it, but enough that you kind of get the gist of it. So there's a, and they have been warned, just like, you know, the weather people give you the best weather they can give you based on the you know, the statistics and all that about the weather. And of course, just like anything else, you can either believe it or you can not believe it. It's just going to be up to you. And they had a ice storm the last year or so in this city. It froze their lake solid, and it was a one-time thing, you know. It was just for that winter. Then it unthawed, you know, and it was fine. So they weren't too, you know, too worried about it, or even thinking about it being repeated. And then all of a sudden the news telling that you needed to get prepared because there was going to be an ice storm. Well, they're all thinking it's just like that last one. And you know, they are trying to stress that no, this is going to be different. This is going to actually be an ice age. And of course, nobody believes it. There are even some of the weathermen who don't believe it and think it's going to be just like it was in the past. But then you got your diehards. So there was a specific man who did believe in this because he was, I don't know if he was, I can't remember what his title was. It was like the governor of this city or something. But anyway, he took it totally serious. And so without telling anybody that he took it serious, he went about on his own now because he had lots of money, and he started collecting seeds and different animals like chickens and cows. And you know, he was prepared to take care of people. But keep in mind, this is a man with money. He prepared these bunkers that were left over from the war down underneath the ground, and he got them, spent a lot of money on this stuff trying to get it prepared. So, of course, you know, the people that are going to live in this are going to be those that can afford to pay him money to bring their families and live here. Because, you know, he's going to want to recoup his money that he's been putting out. And like I said, he owned this place that looks like a castle. Now, I flipped my fabric upside down. This is the part that needs to be cut off on the bottom. Take your ruler, whatever size you want. I put it along the fabric, and then all I do is cut it off. That's it. There's nothing more to it than that. Go ahead and do your other side. Alrighty, so continue with our story. So the man that owns this, I'm going to call it a castle. It's like a great big huge motel, hotel. It's the biggest one in the city, and you know. So the guys all respect it, and they've got people living there, and it's not a big town or anything. And there's a couple other towns that are around this area. But anyway, I should say, I don't know if they're full-size cities or town, to be truthful with you. I think they're little cities is what they are. Of course, now my definition of little and your definition of little is going to be a little bit different. So I want to think it's not like I don't think it's a town of like 10,000 or anything like that. I think it's smaller than that. But then it's not so small that it's only 1,500 either, just to, you know, to give you an idea of the size. But anyway, moving forward in this story, the gist of it is that this guy has somebody that's taking care of this motel at the moment. Now, it's feeding all these people because they're living there. It's taking care of them. Everybody has TV, radio, whatever, so everybody can hear that this storm is coming. Everybody can prepare however they want. But all the people that are in this hotel thing, they don't care because, you know, they're being fed. Well, the man goes about his business, collects all this stuff. He comes out to check on the hotel, and he is, even though I think what it is that maybe, because it made it appear like he didn't care or he wasn't getting prepared for the storm or anything. But I think the reason it did that was just so that he wouldn't show his upper hand of what he was doing. So he felt confident that the guy that was taking care of this place was running it pretty good. Well, come to find out, now I don't know, this is a, this underground whatever it used to be, bomb shelter or something. I don't know what it was, but I'm going to call it an underground city now. This is in a different state. I don't know if it's like one state over or what it is. The guy flies his plane, talks to this guy. Now, this place, when I say it's big, I mean it is really, really big. It's not like a small hotel, and I'm trying to think what would be a big hotel. Maybe something like the Marriott or something like that. It might have even been bigger than that. I don't think it gave us a reference. You just have to kind of, based on what you read, figure out how big it is. But the gist of the story is that this guy ends up being a bad guy, and the townspeople in this town ends up being good. And of course, you know, our war hero ends up being the hero, and the hermit ends up being the hero, and the man, which he was the pilot, he ends up being a hero. But you know, nothing turns out the way that when you're reading it, how you think it's going to turn out. And what happens is when this ice age hits, it's like a mini ice age, and it finally does hit, there are still people who can't believe that it's actually hit. So let me just tell you the very first part, sort of like the synopsis or whatever, well, it's not even the synopsis because there's not going to be enough of it, but just enough that if you're interested, you can get it. If you're not, you don't have to bother. Anyway, so Bishop is our war hero. The woman's name is Mauve. Her son is Ben, and then they had her son kind of found a stray cat named Jet, and he makes friends with her. Okay, so he's in her forest because her property backs up to the national forest. So he comes out and he's getting her prepared for winter. So he did like chopping the firewood and stuff like that. Well, anyway, so he's there and he's talking to her, and he's trying to slowly get to know her. Now, he was friends with her husband, but her husband used to go and they did things like they would play pool together, go to the bar and drink, play darts, things like that. So it's not like he came over to their house and socialized or anything. But her husband's last words to Bishop was, "Take care of my wife if I don't get back from the war." And Bishop got out because he had served a little bit more time, so he got out early. And of course, her husband, whose name was Roger, he didn't make it back. So Bishop felt like it was his obligation, since he told his buddy that he would watch after the wife, that that's what he would do. Well, he knew she wasn't prepared for this ice age that was coming up. So he's over there and he's talking to her and telling her how it's going to be, how they need to get out of there. Okay, so they need to leave. And she goes, "Well, no, I don't want to leave my home, blah, 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 blah." And he goes, "No, you don't understand. This is an ice age. This is nothing that you've ever experienced before, and we need to survive, and you're not going to survive in this house, because once all the gas is gone and the gas is gone, and the food, which already the stores were being unrestocked because nobody could get about, okay, because of the weather and everything." And so she goes, "All right, well, I'll pack some stuff." So what happens is all of a sudden they hear noise, and it sounds like gunfire. So he says, "Stay put in the house. I'm going to go outside and take a look." So she lives out in the country. So he goes outside, looks over to the neighboring home, and hears screaming, and their home is on fire. And so she, of course, you know, she comes running out, and he goes, "I told you to stay put." And she goes, "Well, I wanted to hear what it is. I don't know what it is." And so he said, "Listen, something's going on across the way," meaning next door. Next door was not like next door in your neighborhood. It was like a mile down the road, half a mile down the road or whatever. So he told her, "Stay put. Don't come over. He's going to check it out and find out what's going on, and he'll be right back." So she and the kid, they stayed there. He goes over there and finds 3 men ransacking the house. They had shot everybody, and while he's standing there, he's looking up into a window, and he sees a child up in a window. And so he goes ahead and he gets the better of them. There was 3 of them. He gets 2 of them, and then, of course, you know, they're out to kill him, so it's not like he's going to knock them out or anything. Now, I went ahead and I changed my top thread to black, but I left my bobbin orange, since the orange is my bottom fabric, and I'm sewing the black strip on. Okay, so after this little incident, he goes back to her and tells her, "Pack up everything you have. Right now, we're not taking the car. We are heading out to my place." And she goes, "Well, I don't understand why," and all that. And now, he did have that little girl, because he grabbed her and took her with him. And he said to her, "That whole family has been killed. We're taking this child." They had that truck loaded with all that stuff, and the house is literally burning. So when she gathers whatever, and it's the least amount that you can get, you know, just go with what you got. And when she come outside, she saw that the house was actually burning. He said, "Your house is going to be next. So take what you feel is important. Let's go." So he hid her in the forest in his own little place that he had built back in some type of cave, and he had built it up and everything because he actually has a horse. Now, I don't know if he brought this horse with him back from the service or what, but I do know that when he came back, he never bothered to inform his family that he had come back, which I know that some Marines and people that come out of the service, that's what they do. But anyway, he told her, he said, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to stay here. He's scary and all that, but you have to stay here, and I've got to go find out who is running the town right now, because these guys had come out and done that. He doesn't know who's in charge. Is the sheriff still in charge, or has that town been taken over by somebody? And specifically, he meant the people that are running that hotel. So he sneaks into the city. Now, to get there, they got this great big huge lake that you've got to get across. So he goes out there and he takes his horse and he tests this lake. And come to find out, this lake is already solid all the way to the bottom. So they get across the lake. They sneak into town. He hides his horse, goes ahead and walks the rest of the way, and then finds out that it is the town is crazy and the sheriff has lost control. So now he's trying to figure out, how the heck am I going to get this town back? So that is what's going on in this book. They find out, he figures out how to get the town back, and then the problem is that after they get into this motel hotel, because you know he's watching this stuff happen, is what he's doing. He's already gone to the hermit, but the hermit wants to stay by himself. He said, just leave me be, you know, do whatever. They have talked to each other. The hermit literally does not want to have anything to do with anybody, and there's not like any history on him like there is on this Marine that came back from the service. But anyway, that is literally the gist of the story, and he has to end up taking this woman and her kid, and they've got to go into town, and they got to find some place safe. Now, there are still people living in their homes, but there is no heat or anything. At this point, it's, you know, they've put stuff up against the doors and the windows of their house and everything. And the sad part is that children, and when I say children, I'm talking young kids, probably as young as 7 or 8, and then up to adults. They have literally been forced to become a little army, is what they've, you know, become, which is kind of sad, because it was either you kill or you be killed. And so some of them went ahead and got killed, and then there's others that have a survival instinct, didn't want to be killed, and so they're the ones that are causing chaos. I mean, they're out stealing stuff, and if you were doing any kind of hoarding, well, I wouldn't call it hoarding, I guess. I don't know. If you were one of those ones that shopped and you had a whole bunch of food and everything set back, these kids were made to go around and literally take all that from you, leaving you with hardly anything. Now, you know, you would think, well, we could just go out and you could shoot a deer or whatever, but think about it. This is a trickle-down effect. If it gets bad for humans and all of a sudden there's no fuel to keep warm or anything, and you're out there taking all these animals and killing them for food, well, eventually their animal source is going to be gone also, and you're going to be with nothing. There's not going to be anything out there. All the animals are going to be gone. I mean, they're either going to die off from the cold if they can't survive and stay warm, or they're going to get eaten and killed. So, you know, it's like the end of society as we know it. Kill or be killed. But anyway, you get the gist of it. So that's mainly the story. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish putting these sides on and the top. Then I'll have my middle prepared, and then we will start with the log cabin squares. Alrighty, there is the top portion. Coming up to the bottom. There you go, everyone. Alrighty, so here is the first strip set, and I did 2 at a time. I laid them out 2 at a time. This is just the first one. You guys can connect them. That's all there is to it. There's nothing, there's maybe one, like right here's a nestle. There's nothing right there. So there's usually one nestle on each end that you do. So here's, this one had 2 nestles. Here's one. Oh no, it didn't. See, it only had one also. And you're putting it together right there. Just pay attention to the paper. I'm going to bring the paper down here. So that's what I did. I put these 2 together, then these 2. Now all I have room for is to lay out just 4 of them. So I put 4 on one row and 4 on the other. So I did them in pairs. So I did these 2 and these 2, then these 2 and these 2, and then I connected these 2 to these 2, went to the next row, connected these two to these two, and then connected the two sets. All right, now we're going to do the very next one, which is going to have more on it. You make 2 of each. All right, here's the second set, and it's 10 instead of 8. The 8's in the back. This is the 10 in the front. And now we're going to add it to our quilt top. Now keep in mind that when you attach your sides, the way that I've done it in other videos is that I mark my middle on my quilt. I mark the middle, which in this case, it's the 4th log cabin. And then I pin from the left to the right, or the right to the left. I put a pin in the middle, put my strip in the middle, and then I take it to the right and I take it to the left. And then I pin it all the way along, which I forgot to do right here, because the back may be a little bit longer than your fabric or your border that you're putting on. So you're going to stretch it just a little bit, your border, to get it to fit. And that's it. You just go back and forth and pin it. Pin it as many times as you need to pin it. And that's it. Go ahead and put your left and your right sides, which are the set of 8 log cabins, and then the top are the set of 10 log cabins that you put together. And then we'll come back and we'll take a look at it. So I'm finishing up this last border right here. And I got to thinking, oops, I've lost a pen, about that book that I was telling you about. And some interesting, not about the book now, but something interesting when, if we were ever, and I'm not saying we couldn't be, but I'm talking about the world. So I'm pretty sure that different places had different things set up. It wasn't just this one place. I mean, we're just learning about this one place or reading about this one place. But I got to thinking about it, and I understand, you know, they have all the plants and all that, but were the correct people, and by correct, I mean the people that have the knowledge in certain things, were they saved? Because in the book, that's not what was saved. It was the townspeople. So what you're going to want to do is, if this is something that's going to happen, you're going to want to make sure that you get the right kind of people, or at least people that can read, because you're going to want to collect books and take specific books. Now, I'm not talking about books for enjoyment. I'm talking about books about agriculture and things like that, how you can create your soil. Because these people had a generator down this one part of the building that they had made. They had it heat controlled and everything, because it had a soil and it was just like a garden, but it was like a greenhouse, you know. And then you had to figure out, how are you going to create medicine, you know, specific medicines, because you can't just take a medicine and expect to go backwards and learn how to create it and make it if you don't have scientists and things like that to be doing all this. Now, of course, in this book, it never did mention at all, other than when he was trying to gather his people and trying to put the word out about this underground, I don't know what it was considered, but that's the only time they ever talked about money, because once we were in a crisis, money wasn't even mentioned. Barter wasn't mentioned, nothing. It was strictly survival, so people were bringing whatever food they could bring, and clothes and things like that. All this stuff was just, I mean, nobody thought about money. It wasn't even something that came to mind. And what good would it do anyway? Money's not going to do you any good. It's not like you were buying something made by somebody or brought in from some location to purchase. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think I would ever want to live in that kind of circumstances. There was a lot of, I don't know how many books and how your mind works, but based on your lifestyle and the things you've read, or you can't even imagine the stuff that goes on when there's a crisis. I'm not talking about what just happened to us before. That wasn't a crisis like a cold, I was going to say a cold snap, but I'm not talking about a cold snap. But just like in the movie that comes to mind is, oh my gosh, I can't even think of the movie now that I thought about it. Ice Age, that's what comes to mind. But if you could just imagine what it would be like during those times to have to live. I mean, first off, you're going to constantly be cold because you don't have anything to keep you warm except the heat. And in this one little incident, this guy who was a computer whiz, and of course, you know, now this building is controlled by a computer. I'm just giving you little pieces of it, but he was so I want to think that he was like in his early 20s, but he really didn't think beyond the point that I think that he figured he was going to die eventually anyway, because he just didn't care. And he turned all the heat off and everything and locked himself or barricaded himself in this one room. Well, you know, everybody else is suffering because there's no heat, and they can't get into the room because he has children in the room, and he's threatened to kill all these children if anybody tries to break in the room. And so he was literally controlling everything. And the disadvantage of is that I think he was just a little bit mental because of the oh gosh, what would you call it? His mother was a mistress to his father, and his father would never recognize him. His father was the one that was that wealthy, rich one. I'm not quite sure, you know, it didn't go into detail of why he was not recognized or anything like that. But that kind of stuff kind of wears on you. It doesn't, in his case, it kind of made him a little cracked. So that's why I say I don't think he thought too much about his future. I guess he figured he would die anyway, so it didn't make any difference. But I tell you what, he mainly, when he was alive, all he did, which I'm kind of surprised that he learned so much computer stuff, is because all he did was play games. All right, I'm going to try to hold this up like I did before and show you what it looks like when it's totally completed before you do all your quilting on it. And if you don't have any place to be taking your quilt because you don't know of any place right offhand, you know, this is maybe your first one, or you're afraid to quilt it or whatever. I'm gonna get her name out here. I thought I had it out here so I could show it to you. Hold on one second, I'm gonna find it, because she works with the Fort Worth Fabric Studio and she does the quilting for them. So let me find her information. Okay, here it is with that border on it. You know, if you get your border mixed up, don't worry about it. You know, it's not the end of the world. But that's pretty good size. I got it all done. Let me see if I can go in with a little bit here and show it to you. There you go. And then what I was trying to remember was the long arm service at Fort Worth Fabric Studios is Laura Brady. She's their master quilter. You can mail your quilts to, and I'll put the little piece of paper down here so that you guys can see it, because I'm on the other side of the table trying to show you this quilt, okay? There we go. That's the long arm service from the Fort Worth Fabric Studios. And they have free return shipping too. Now, I haven't used their services, but they are pretty good because you can see their detailed work on Fort Worth Fabric Studios Facebook page. Okay, I hope you guys like this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and I will see you next time. And thank you everybody for watching. I really appreciate it.